The rain hadn't stopped since morning. From the 12th floor of the law firm, the city looked like it was dissolving, its edges blurred by mist and exhaustion. Claire Bennett sat at the end of the polished walnut table, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. The skyline mirrored her mood, fractured, gray, silent. Her attorney, Evan Hale, was already there when she arrived. Perfect suit, perfect calm. He didn't rise when she entered. He simply gestured to the chair opposite him as though the outcome of her life had already been drafted, notarized, and filed away. "This won't be easy," he said, sliding a thick folder toward her. "But I'll make sure you walk out of this with what's yours." "What's yours?" The phrase hung between them like a promise and a warning. Claire opened the folder. Inside were photographs, financial disclosures, and her husband's latest amendments, an elegant word for legal sabotage. Marcus had always been charming in public, but in private he was a strategist, the kind who smiled while tightening the trap. Evan spoke in the low, deliberate cadence of a man used to being obeyed. "Marcus's attorney is ruthless, but she's predictable. I can outmaneuver her." There was something magnetic about the confidence in his voice. It carried the rhythm of certainty, the kind Claire had lost months ago. She nodded, signing the retainer agreement with trembling fingers. He studied her as she signed. "You're doing the right thing," he said, his gaze steady. "You've been too quiet for too long." For a moment she believed him. By the time she left the office, night had swallowed the city whole. She walked through puddles reflecting the red glow of brake lights, thinking about how quickly trust could be bought with paper, ink, and desperation. At home the silence was unbearable. The house still smelled like Marcus. His cologne, his bourbon, his control. Every object was a ghost. The mirror in the hallway caught her reflection, a woman halfway between grief and fury. Her phone buzzed, a message from Evan. "Don't answer any calls from Marcus. Let me handle everything." It was both comforting and chilling. Over the next week, Evan became her anchor. He called daily, guiding her through procedural chaos with surgical precision. She noticed how his tone shifted, professional during the day, warmer at night. He seemed to understand the unspoken parts of her anger, the way betrayal became physical, pressing on the chest like weight. One evening, as they reviewed documents in his office, their hands brushed when she reached for a page. Neither of them spoke, but she saw something flicker behind his composure, something she couldn't name yet. When she left, he said, "You're stronger than you think, Claire. Don't let him make you forget that." It sounded like encouragement, but it felt like possession. 2 weeks later, the first hearing date arrived. The courtroom smelled of paper and fear. Marcus sat at the opposite table, whispering to his attorney, a woman with eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Claire avoided looking at him. Evan leaned close and murmured, "Let me do the talking. You just keep your composure." He spoke with such certainty that she obeyed instinctively. When the judge entered, everything slowed. The sound of the gavel cracked the silence like thunder. Evan began his statement, smooth, eloquent, rehearsed. For the first time since the separation, Claire felt like she might win. But then, during a recess, she saw something. Across the hallway, Evan and Marcus's attorney stood too close. Their voices were low, their body language too familiar. A brief touch of hands, a smile that didn't belong in a courtroom. Claire froze. When Evan turned back toward her, his expression was unreadable, cold, perfect, professional. For the first time, she wondered if the man she'd hired to save her might already have sold her out. Claire tried to convince herself she'd imagined it. The touch between Evan and Marcus's attorney, the flicker of something unprofessional. She told herself lawyers talked, negotiated, sometimes smiled, but the image wouldn't leave her mind. It returned in flashes, like a recurring nightmare she couldn't quite wake from. The next morning, she arrived early at the courthouse, hoping to find Evan before the session. He was already there, his tie perfectly aligned, sipping coffee, as if the world hadn't cracked open the day before. "Rough night?" he asked, noticing her silence. "Just tired," she lied. He smiled faintly. "Don't worry. Everything's under control." Those words again, under control. They sounded reassuring, but in his voice, they carried weight, like a subtle command. After the hearing, Claire began to notice details she'd missed before. Evan often avoided her eyes when discussing Marcus's financial disclosures. He downplayed certain irregularities in the bank statements, calling them minor bookkeeping issues. When she pressed him for explanations, his tone hardened. "Claire, trust me," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You hired me for strategy, not suspicion." It was said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. At home her doubts began to bloom like mold in the dark. She couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house reminded her of Marcus. Every silence reminded her of Evan. She scrolled through old text messages, rereading each word he'd sent, hunting for hidden meanings. Then one night she found it. A small mistake. In one of Evan's emails, buried in a thread of legal jargon, was an attachment, a scanned document that shouldn't have been there. It was a draft of a proposed settlement Marcus's attorney had mentioned that very morning, one Claire had never seen before. The file's metadata listed its last editor, E. Hale. Her breath caught. Was it coincidence? A clerical error? Or proof? She printed the page, staring at the signature line, her own name, forged in a faint imitation of her handwriting. The next day she confronted him. "Evan," she said, stepping into his office without knocking. "What is this?" She dropped the printed document on his desk. He glanced at it, only briefly, before folding his hands calmly. "Where did you get this?" "From you," she said. "You sent it by mistake." A pause, then the faintest smile. "Claire, documents circulate all the time. You probably saw a draft Marcus's team sent over for review. I didn't forge anything. You edited it," she said. "Your name is on it." He rose slowly, moving around the desk. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "You're angry. I get that. But if you start accusing me of misconduct in the middle of litigation, you'll destroy your own case. Marcus will use that against you." The way he said it, not if, but when, chilled her. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let me protect you. That's what you're paying me for." She froze, his hand heavy, too familiar. When he let go, she felt both relief and disgust. That night she drove aimlessly through the rain, until she found herself parked outside Marcus's townhouse. The lights were on inside, laughter spilled through the half-open window. He was entertaining guests. He looked free, and she, somewhere between the man she once loved and the lawyer she'd trusted, was trapped. Her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't be digging into things you don't understand." She stared at the screen, her pulse hammering. Seconds later, another message arrived, this one from Evan. "We need to talk, privately." She didn't reply. The next morning, she walked into the firm unannounced. Evan wasn't there, but his assistant, a young woman named Denise, seemed startled by her presence. "Is Mr. Hale expecting you?" "No," Claire said, "but I'll wait." While Denise stepped away to make a call, Claire noticed something on the desk, a file labeled Hale v. Preston. Her stomach twisted. Preston was Marcus's attorney's last name. She flipped it open. Inside were meeting notes, joint strategy discussions between both counsels, marked confidential, client unaware. The sound of footsteps in the hallway snapped her back. She closed the file just as Evan entered. He stopped when he saw her. For the first time, his composure faltered. "Claire," he said softly. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," she replied, "but I needed to see who you really work for." For a long second, neither moved. Rain beat against the window, the city murmuring far below. Then he said, "You're making a mistake." She met his gaze. "So are you." By the third hearing, Claire understood that truth was a currency, and Evan had been trading hers. It began subtly. Small deviations in his statements. Omissions disguised as strategy. When the judge questioned why certain assets hadn't been disclosed, Evan blamed clerical delays, assuring her everything was under review. But Claire recognized some of those missing items. The lake house deed, the joint investment account, her grandmother's jewelry fund. Those weren't delays. Those were erasures. After the session, she confronted him in the marble corridor outside the courtroom. "Where are the assets, Evan? You told me they'd be presented." He adjusted his cufflinks, eyes scanning the hallway. "I decided not to introduce them yet. Tactically, It's better this way. Tactically for who? She shot back. For you, he said with a calm that only made it worse. You don't understand how the game works. Let me handle it. She wanted to believe him. But when Marcus's attorney passed by, exchanging a brief nod with Evan, Claire felt the air leave her lungs. There it was again, that silent language between them, smooth as deceit. That night, she poured a glass of wine she couldn't taste, and opened her laptop. If Evan was hiding something, there would be a trail. She searched her case files, the shared folders, the encrypted links. Then she found a subfolder she hadn't noticed before, titled simply Drafts. Inside were duplicates of her affidavits, modified subtly. One line here, one paragraph there, all favoring Marcus's version of events. And at the bottom of the list, a document labeled settlement_final_a.docs. Her heart pounded as she opened it. The terms were catastrophic. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Bennett, do you understand the terms? She stared at Evan, who nodded almost imperceptibly, as if commanding obedience. Something inside her broke. She picked up the pen, then paused. I need a recess, she said. Evan's jaw tightened. Claire, I said I need a recess. The judge granted 15 minutes. Claire walked out without looking back. In the courthouse restroom, she locked herself in a stall and pulled out her phone. Her fingers shook as she photographed every page of the settlement, every signature, every header. She emailed them to herself, then to a new address she'd created under a different name. When she returned, Evan was waiting in the hallway, expression unreadable. You made us look unprepared, he said. You made me look disposable, she replied. His voice softened. Careful, Claire. You don't want to turn this into a war. She met his gaze with new clarity. It already is. That evening she received an envelope at her apartment door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single page, a copy of the settlement she'd refused to sign, now bearing her forged signature and a court filing stamp dated that afternoon. Her breath caught. She wasn't paranoid anymore. Evan hadn't just turned on her. He'd gone public. The next morning, Claire arrived at the courthouse to find the impossible had already happened. The forged settlement was entered into the record. Her name, her signature, her ruin, all neatly stamped with the court seal. The clerk looked up from the desk, indifferent. Your attorney submitted this yesterday, Miss Bennett. Everything appears in order. Her mouth went dry. My attorney? Yes, Mr. Hale. The name echoed inside her skull. Outside, the morning sun felt like interrogation lights. Claire stumbled down the courthouse steps, her pulse roaring in her ears. Somewhere between panic and disbelief, she realized what Evan had done. He'd closed her case, legally binding her to a settlement she never approved. And worse, he'd done it so flawlessly that to undo it, she'd need evidence strong enough to indict him. Back at her apartment, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Marcus, reporters, even her own family. Everyone wanted a comment, a confirmation, a confession. On social media, news outlets framed her as the uncooperative spouse, the erratic ex-wife sabotaging her own legal team. The narrative had shifted overnight. She scrolled through an online article featuring a photo of Evan leaving the courthouse, confident, untouchable. The caption read, Attorney Evan Hale successfully resolves Bennett divorce after months of delays. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. Claire drove to the firm, stormed past the receptionist, and slammed open Evan's office door. He didn't even look surprised. Claire, he said calmly, this isn't the time or place. You forged my signature, she hissed. You filed a fake settlement. He gestured toward the glass walls, colleagues passing by, glancing in. Lower your voice. Don't tell me what to do, he sighed. You're emotional. That's understandable. But what you're suggesting is criminal. You really want to accuse me, your own lawyer, of forgery without proof. She stared at him, speechless, realizing how easily he could twist this. Look, he continued, voice softening, the case is closed. Take the money, move on. That's the best outcome you could have hoped for. She wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered, you destroyed me. He tilted his head. No, Claire. I protected you from yourself. That night, her apartment felt smaller than ever. Every shadow carried his voice. Every silence his control. She opened her laptop, searching for digital traces of the forgery. But the firm's document portal was gone. Her access revoked. Then she remembered Denise, the assistant. The one who'd looked away too quickly when she'd entered the office weeks ago. Claire found her on LinkedIn, then sent a message from a burner account. "I know what Evan did. I just need proof. I'll make it worth your risk." Hours passed. No reply. Then just past midnight, a single message arrived. "Meet me tomorrow. 6 a.m. Coffee House on 5th. Don't be seen." The cafe was nearly empty when Claire arrived, rain streaking the windows. Denise sat in the corner, pale and trembling. "I shouldn't even be talking to you," she said. "He watches everything." Claire slid a folded check across the table. "I don't want your money," Denise whispered. "I just want this over. Then help me end it." Denise exhaled. "He's been working with Marcus's team for months. There's a private retainer agreement between them, sealed under a consulting clause. I've seen the transfers." Claire's hands shook. "You can prove that?" "I copied the files. But if he finds out..." She stopped, eyes darting toward the door. Evan Hale was standing outside in the rain, his reflection fractured in the window pane, watching. Denise froze. "Oh God, he followed you." When Claire turned back, Evan was gone. That night, Denise disappeared. Her apartment door was open, her things scattered. The police called it a possible voluntary absence. But Claire knew better. A few days later she received a manila envelope on her doorstep. Inside, one printed line: "Stop digging, or the next disappearance will be legal." Below it, a court summons Marcus Bennett for Claire Bennett, claiming defamation and breach of settlement. She laughed, then a dry, hysterical sound. The law had turned against her completely. Evan had buried her once. Now he was coming to finish the job. The summons arrived in a stiff white envelope, with her name embossed in black: Bennett Verkos Bennett. The irony was unbearable. Marcus was suing her again, this time for defamation, for daring to question a forged agreement. Every paragraph was a trap, every sentence crafted to twist her words against her, and the signature at the bottom: Evan Hale, attorney of record, felt like a final slap. He wasn't just Marcus's ally, he was his lawyer now. The realization hit like a car crash in slow motion. She replayed every conversation with him, the confident promises, the comforting tone, the way he always said, "I'll handle it." He had handled it, all right, handled her. She took the documents to a friend, a junior prosecutor named Alana Reed. They'd met years ago in law school, back when Claire still believed the law was a language of truth. Alana read in silence, her expression hardening. "This is deliberate," she said finally. "No attorney would file this unless he had full control over the evidence chain. He's insulated himself. He knew you'd fight back. So what do I do? You need his retainer agreement with Marcus. That's the key. If you can prove dual representation, you can bring him down." Claire swallowed. "And where do I find that?" Alana hesitated. "In his private client archive, the one only he and his assistant had access to." Denise. The memory of the terrified assistant returned, the trembling hands, the rain outside the cafe, the reflection of Evan watching. Claire's stomach twisted. She said she copied files. "Then they exist somewhere," Alana said. "If she's gone, someone else might have them, or he's hiding them." That night Claire broke into Hale and Associates. She waited until 2 a.m., until the janitorial staff left and the city outside turned to static. Wearing gloves, she slipped through the glass doors, her breath fogging faintly in the cold air. The firm smelled of polish and fear. Evan's office was immaculate, not a paper out of place. But when she opened the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, she found a keycard labeled Storage B2. In the basement archive, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Rows of metal drawers stretched endlessly, each labeled with names and case numbers. She scanned until she found B. Init Vit. B. Init Vit, file hash 417A. The folder inside was thicker than it should have been. She opened it. Inside were 2 retainer contracts, one with her name, one with Marcus's. Both bore Evan's signature. Both dated the same week. Her pulse quickened. She photographed every page, uploaded them to her cloud, then froze as footsteps echoed down the corridor. "Claire," a voice called softly. "You shouldn't be here, Evan." She turned off her phone's light and crouched behind a cabinet. His shoes clicked against the tile, slow, deliberate. "You've made this worse for yourself," he said. "But you always had a talent for that." She stayed silent, clutching the camera. "You think you can outsmart me," he continued. "Closer now. I built this system. I know every angle, every exit." He stopped inches from where she hid. She could smell his cologne, sharp, surgical. Then the alarm blared. Security lights flared red, sirens wailing. Claire ran, sprinting through the maze of drawers, the sound of her breath merging with the alarm. She burst into the stairwell, clutching the folder to her chest. By the time she reached the street, police sirens were already cutting through the night. Hours later she sat in Alana's apartment, shaking. The prosecutor spread the photos across the coffee table, the dual retainers, the forged signatures, the proof. "This is enough to open an ethics complaint," Alana said, "but not enough to convict. He'll claim clerical overlap, miscommunication, whatever he needs." Claire looked at the papers, her voice flat. "Then I'll find more." Alana sighed. "You're playing with fire, Claire. He's dangerous." "I know." She stared out the window. Dawn was breaking, pale and indifferent. "But I'm done being the victim in his story." The next day, a courier delivered another envelope to her door. Inside was a photograph, grainy, shot through a window. It showed her inside Alana's apartment, holding the evidence folder. On the back, a single line in neat handwriting. "I warned you once, next time I won't." Claire felt the chill move through her bones. He was everywhere, watching, anticipating, 2 steps ahead. But this time, she had something he didn't, proof he couldn't unmake. And she was ready to go to war. Rain hammered the courthouse windows that morning, a percussion of nerves and inevitability. Claire stood at the defense table, her fingers gripping the edge so tightly the wood left marks, across the aisle. Evan sat beside Marcus, calm, immaculate, untouchable. His cufflinks glinted under the fluorescent lights, a silent declaration that the game was already his. The courtroom buzzed with curiosity. Reporters lined the benches, their pens poised, waiting to see the woman accused of defaming her own attorney. The betrayal had turned into spectacle. Judge Rourke entered, and the room fell into a hush. Claire's new counsel, a wiry man named David Shore, leaned toward her. "We only need one thing, Claire. Proof he represented both of you. Stick to the facts. Don't let him provoke you." But when Evan rose to speak, provocation became art. "Your Honor," he began, his tone smooth as oil, "this is not a case of misconduct. It's a case of obsession. My former client refuses to accept that her marriage ended, and now she's attacking the professionals who tried to help her move on." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Claire's jaw tightened. "She forged her own scandal," Evan continued. "She broke into my firm. She stole confidential materials. She's attempting to destroy reputations because she can't live with her own decisions." David rose. "Objection, Your Honor." "Speculation." "Sustained," Judge Rourke said, though his tone was weary. "Mr. Hale, keep to the evidence." Evan nodded politely. "Of course." He smiled at Claire then. The same gentle smile he'd used the day she signed her first retainer. The smile that had started it all. When it was Claire's turn to testify, she felt the weight of 100 eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the oath. "Miss Bennett," David began, "can you describe the relationship you had with Mr. Hale during your divorce proceedings?" "At first I trusted him completely," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "He was confident, persuasive. I believed he was fighting for me." "And was he?" Her gaze found Evan. "No. He was fighting for my husband." A murmur rippled again through the courtroom. David displayed 2 documents on the screen, the dual retainers. "Are these the contracts you discovered?" "Yes. Both signed by Mr. Hale. Both dated within 48 hours of each other." "And did you authorize him to represent your husband?" "Never." Evan stood. "Your Honor, These documents are fabricated. They were stolen from my office during a break-in. My assistant, he stopped himself, as if remembering Denise's name was dangerous. My former employee may have been coerced. Your assistant is missing, David said quietly. Do you deny that? Evan's jaw flexed. I have no knowledge of her whereabouts. Convenient, David said. The judge called for order as the room erupted again. During the recess, Claire stepped outside for air. The hallway smelled of coffee and anxiety. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard, when a voice behind her whispered, "He's losing control." She turned. Alana was there holding a flash drive. "What is that?" "The sealed emails between Evan and Marcus's attorney," Alana said. "Denise sent them to my office months ago. Said didn't realize what they were until this morning." Claire's heart pounded. "Can we use them? They're admissible if we can verify chain of custody. Get them to your lawyer. Fast." Back in the courtroom, David inserted the drive into the projection system. The first email appeared on screen. From e.hale@haleassociates.com to r.preston@prestonslegal.com. Subject: Settlement adjustments. Client Claire Bennett, unaware. Gasps rippled through the benches. Evan's composure cracked. Barely, but enough. David faced him. "Care to explain this correspondence, Mr. Hale?" Evan's voice was low, controlled. "Those were negotiation drafts. Common in high conflict cases." "Then why does this one?" David said. Clicking to the next slide. "Include a payment confirmation from Marcus Bennett's offshore account labeled Consulting Services." "Hale?" The silence was absolute. Judge Rourke leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, I expect an immediate explanation." Evan's mask faltered. "That's out of context." David turned to Claire. "Miss Bennett, is this the proof you sought?" She met Evan's eyes. "No. This is the beginning." The judge adjourned early, ordering an investigation into Hale and Associates for possible ethical violations. The media exploded within hours. Headlines shouting, "Star divorce lawyer under inquiry." That evening, Claire sat in her car outside the courthouse, watching reporters swarm the steps. She felt no victory, only exhaustion. Then her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "You think this is over? Check your front door." She drove home, every nerve on fire. The envelope waiting on her porch was damp from the rain. Inside, a single photograph. Evan, sitting in his office, smiling. And behind him, barely visible through the window reflection, her, taken that morning. He was still watching. By the time dawn bled through the blinds, the headlines had changed tone. Legal prodigy Evan Hale faces investigation. Client-lawyer scandal rocks downtown court. But the story still framed Claire as the unstable accuser who'd gone too far. Public sympathy hovered just out of reach, like a verdict postponed indefinitely. Her phone pulsed every few seconds. Calls from journalists, from her parents, from numbers she didn't recognize. Each unanswered ring felt like a ticking bomb. At 9 a.m., Alana called. They froze his firm's accounts. The bar moved fast. He suspended pending review. Claire closed her eyes. "So it's over?" Alana hesitated. "Not even close. Marcus filed a motion to enforce the fake settlement. They're trying to finish it before the inquiry ruins him." Evan disappeared from the courthouse for 3 days. When he returned, he looked carved from fatigue, jaw tight, tie loosened, eyes darker than she remembered. Yet the charisma remained, weaponized as ever. He cornered her outside the elevators. "Congratulations," he said. "You got what you wanted." "I wanted justice," she replied. He laughed softly. "Justice isn't real. There's only leverage, and you just burned yours." The elevator doors opened. He stepped closer instead of entering. "Walk away, Claire, before this gets worse." She stared at him, seeing the flicker of something behind the arrogance. Fear. "I'm not the one falling, Evan." That afternoon, David received an anonymous package. Inside were 20 printed screenshots, Claire's private messages, bank transfers, fragments of conversations that painted her as complicit in the alleged forgery. Manufactured, but convincing. "They're planting evidence," David said. "If the media runs this, You'll look like you orchestrated the whole thing. Claire's throat tightened. Then we leak first. Full disclosure. Every file. Every email. That's nuclear. Exactly. They uploaded the documents to a public drive and sent the link to every journalist covering the case. Within hours, the story detonated. Hashtags trended. Threads dissected each file line by line. The tide shifted. Slowly, then completely. Screenshots of Evan's offshore payments went viral. The narrative flipped, but victory carried a price. That night, someone shattered the windows of her apartment. The sound dragged her from sleep like a gunshot. She crawled to the kitchen, heart pounding, and saw the message spray painted across her wall. Liar Thaf. War. The police came, took photos, filed a report. No suspects, no cameras working that night. When they left, she sat on the floor among the glass shards, realizing how small she'd become in his world. How every move he made still reached her, even now that his power was slipping. 2 days later, Alana called again. He's making a statement. Live press conference. Noon. Claire watched it on her laptop. Coffee untouched. The image of Evan framed by microphones and flashbulbs. He looked repentant, carefully human. I made mistakes, he said, voice steady, but I never betrayed my clients. These allegations come from a woman in pain, manipulated by outside forces. He was rewriting the story again, turning contrition into theater. Then a journalist asked, "What about the payments from Marcus Bennett?" Evan's smile faltered. Those were consulting fees. Routine. Before the broadcast cut, another reporter shouted. And the missing assistant? His expression cracked. A flash of panic, quickly buried. But Claire saw it. Everyone did. That night, Alana sent her a text. They found Denise. The message came with a link to a local news site. The article was brief. An unidentified woman discovered in a motel outside Albany. Alive but in critical condition. Authorities suspected foul play. Claire drove 3 hours through rain to reach the hospital. Denise lay unconscious, hooked to machines, her wrists bandaged. A nurse said she'd been found with a flash drive taped beneath her clothing. Inside were hundreds of encrypted files labeled Hale_confidential. Claire clutched the device like a relic. You did it, she whispered to the sleeping woman. You saved us both. By morning, David decrypted the drive. The contents were worse than they imagined. Recordings of private meetings, transfers, falsified testimonies, evidence of a years-long pattern of collusion between Hale and associates, and multiple opposing counsels. Evan's empire wasn't collapsing. It was imploding. As the bar prepared criminal charges, Claire finally allowed herself a single fragile breath of relief. But deep down she knew, men like Evan never went quietly. And before the law could finish him, he would come for her one last time. Morning broke cold and bright over a city that no longer felt familiar. Every screen in every cafe carried the same headline. Evan Hale indicted for fraud, obstruction, and ethics violations. Claire watched from a distance, through glass, through reflection. Claire, his voice, low and composed, cut through the static. Her pulse spiked. Evan, I wanted to hear you one last time, he said. Before they bury me in paperwork and headlines, you should call your lawyer. I had one. You ruined that. She closed her eyes, steadying herself. You forged my name. You lied in court. You destroyed people. I gave you freedom, he said. You just couldn't live without a cage. She almost laughed. You're delusional. No, he murmured. I'm honest now. You think this ends with me behind bars? It never ends, Claire. People like you need villains to stay righteous. He paused. Check your email. The line went dead. On her screen, a new message appeared. No subject line, no body text, just a single attachment, audio_recording_17.mp3. Her hands trembled as she pressed play. Evan's voice, calm, deliberate, client aware of financial manipulation, suggested hiding assets to avoid tax exposure, confirming she authorized signature. Then her own voice, spliced, stitched together from courtroom statements, fragments of phone calls. It sounded real. It sounded damning. He'd created his own insurance policy. Within hours, the recording leaked online. Headlines flipped again. Was Bennett complicit? Twist in Hale case raises questions about client role. The internet turned savage. Comment sections filled with venom. Strangers dissecting her life like evidence. Every victory she'd fought for was tainted now. Every truth repainted in doubt. David called. We can prove it's doctored, but the damage is already done. The jury pool's poisoned. Claire sank into the couch, feeling the weight of the entire system pressing down again. The same machinery that had once silenced her, now grinding her into a new story she couldn't control. Then we fight again, she said. You're exhausted. I'm alive. Outside, sirens wailed. Somewhere, justice kept chewing through another name, another case, another soul. A week later, federal agents raided Hale and Associates. They found everything: falsified settlements, offshore transfers, blackmail material. The headlines shifted once more. Hale's fabricated evidence confirmed. But the public's appetite for outrage had moved on. Claire's name would always linger beside his in the archives. A footnote, a question mark. She met Alana in a quiet diner that night. Rain streaked the windows again, as if the story had circled back to its opening scene. Is this justice? Claire asked. Alana stirred her coffee. It's survival. Claire looked out at the city. The skyline that once felt unreachable now reflected in every puddle. Then maybe that's enough. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that Hale wasn't finished. Not yet. He'd built too many back doors, too many traps, and men like him never stayed buried for long. The first snowfall came early that year, coating the courthouse steps in silence. Claire watched flakes dissolve on the sleeve of her coat, the cold biting through the fabric. She had returned to testify one last time, not as a victim, not even as a plaintiff, but as the final witness in the government's case against Evan Hale. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The prosecution had mountains of evidence now. The forged settlements, the offshore payments, the encrypted recordings from Denise's flash drive. Yet Claire knew the truth was never what people wanted. They wanted performance, they wanted blood, and Evan was still a performer. When he entered in his tailored suit and shackles, the crowd stirred. He looked thinner, paler, but his presence filled the room as if the chains were props. He smiled at the cameras, at the jury, and finally at her. The look said, "You're part of my story, even now." The prosecutor began. "Miss Bennett, please describe your last direct interaction with the defendant." Claire kept her voice steady. "He called me the night before his arrest. Said the system would never believe a woman like me. He was wrong." Evan's attorney objected. Irrelevant, inflammatory, but the judge overruled it. The prosecutor continued, guiding her through each document, each message, until the pattern was undeniable. Claire spoke clearly, without bitterness. She wanted the record to show not rage, but truth. When it was Evan's turn to cross-examine her, the courtroom tensed. Even chained, he carried authority. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice softer than she remembered. "You've told this court I betrayed you, that I forged documents, manipulated your life. But isn't it true that you benefited from my work?" "I survived it," she said. He smiled faintly. "Survival isn't innocence." Her pulse spiked, but she didn't look away. "And manipulation isn't intelligence. You confuse the two." For a moment, the mask slipped, a flash of venom, quickly buried beneath composure. "No further questions," he said, returning to his seat. After adjournment, Claire lingered in the empty courtroom. The air smelled of old wood and cold dust, a space scrubbed clean of truth. David found her there. "It's done," he said. "He's finished." She shook her head. "Men like him don't end. They echo." David hesitated. "You could leave, start over somewhere. Nobody would blame you." "I will," she said quietly. "But not yet." That night she walked to the river, the same one that cut through downtown like a scar. Snowflakes drifted across the dark water. The city lights flickered in distorted reflections, as if trying to erase themselves. She took out her phone and opened an email she hadn't shown anyone, an encrypted message sent from an unknown domain. The subject line read, "For your protection." Inside was a list of names, judges, prosecutors, attorneys, all linked to Hale's financial network. Some still active, some promoted. Attached was a note in his handwriting. "If you truly want justice, you'll know what to do with this." Her hands trembled. It wasn't just a confession, it was a seed of corruption, meant to grow inside her. She could turn it over to the authorities, or she could use it. By morning the file had vanished from her inbox. Deleted, erased. She didn't know if she'd imagined it, or if someone had retrieved it remotely. But the message lingered in her mind. At the sentencing hearing, Evan refused to speak. When the judge read 30 years without parole, the gallery erupted in whispers. Claire watched his expression, calm, distant, almost serene. As guards led him away, he turned once, catching her gaze. "Careful," he mouthed, and then he was gone. Weeks passed. Claire avoided interviews, ignored calls, disappeared from public view. But the quiet didn't bring peace. She dreamt of signatures bleeding across paper, of gavel strikes that sounded like gunshots. One evening, she found a plain envelope on her doorstep, no return address. Inside a single sheet of paper, a balance transfer confirmation from a foreign bank. The sender line read simply, "C. Bennett, the amount, $2 million. And beneath it, a note in that same perfect handwriting. "Justice pays well, doesn't it?" Her breath caught. Her name, her account. A ghost transaction. He was gone, yet still moving pieces. She sank onto the floor, laughter and panic colliding in her throat. It wasn't over. It would never be over. The law had closed its case, but the war between truth and power had only changed hands. Winter retreated slowly, leaving the city washed in slush and gray light. The courthouse square was almost empty now. Reporters gone, cameras stored, the story already fading into rumor. But inside one of the buildings across the street, in a cramped office that smelled of stale coffee and printer toner, Claire Bennett began to rebuild a life. She rented the space under a false name. No plaques on the door, no receptionist, just a laptop and a folding desk. People came quietly, mostly women who whispered the same words she once had. "My lawyer betrayed me. He made me sign things I didn't understand." She listened, took notes, filed complaints for them pro bono. It was how she slept at night, one broken system patched by another. On the wall above her desk hung a single photo, the courthouse steps under falling snow, the place where everything had ended and begun again. News of Evan Hale's death arrived in March. A cell fire at the federal facility in Otisville. Accidental, they said, though some reports mentioned a locked door, a missing key. His ashes were claimed by no one. Claire read the notice twice, waiting for a feeling. Relief, maybe peace, but only numbness came. The man had destroyed her, then defined her. Even dead, he was a shadow across every room. That night she poured herself a drink and opened the file folder she'd kept hidden since the trial. Printouts from the flash drive Denise had recovered. Names, payments, private communications. The part she never handed over to prosecutors. At the bottom was a sealed envelope addressed in Hale's handwriting. "For Claire, in case I can't finish the story." Her pulse quickened. She'd never opened it. Inside was a single page, a list of 5 law firms, each tied to sealed settlements under investigation, and one sentence at the bottom. Handwritten, slanted, intimate. "If corruption built me, what will justice build you?" She stared at the words until the ink seemed to shift, as if whispering a challenge. A week later, Alana found her packing boxes. "You're leaving?" Claire nodded. "There's more work to do. In DC maybe, or Boston, anywhere they think they're clean." Alana leaned against the doorframe. "You can't fix the whole system." "I know." Claire smiled faintly, "but I can keep it from fixing people like him." They hugged, the kind of silent embrace that carried too much history for words. When Alana left, Claire looked around the office, the desk, the snow photo, the empty coffee cups, then locked the door behind her. That night she walked to the river one last time. The water moved slow beneath the bridge, carrying the reflection of the courthouse dome like a broken coin. The air smelled of rain and metal, the way it had on the day she first met Evan Hale. She reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope again, watching the ink blur as snow began to fall. For a moment she considered burning it, ending the loop. But instead, she slipped it into her pocket. Justice wasn't fire, it was endurance. Weeks later, in a different city, a new lawyer opened her office door to find a plain envelope waiting on the floor. No name, no return address, only 5 words typed neatly on a single sheet inside. If he fooled you, call me. The number below was unlisted, the name beneath it, C. Bennett. Outside, spring light caught the glass towers and the courthouse steps beyond. Somewhere, another story was about to begin, another trust about to be tested, another truth waiting for someone willing to ruin her life to prove it. And in that endless cycle between betrayal and belief, Claire Bennett walked forward, coat collar turned against the wind, a quiet figure swallowed by the city she no longer feared. The verdict had never really belonged to the court, it belonged to the ones who refused to stop looking.